began to come out here, we had access to about 60 million acres of land. The land could only support so many people in the region. And so you had a leader who had to have knowledge of the environment, where game was, where you could procure plants for food, fish, good drinking water, firewood. I've really gotten angry because our people have been referred to as nomads, by some folks. And we weren't nomads. We knew where we were going. We knew where we had to procure food and the things that sustained us. So it was sort of a annual journey that we made over the course of the seasons so that we could live,
Oh, they had a freedom such as the world has never known. No one else has ever experienced anything to compare with being a Sioux Indian in the 1840s with these magnificent horses and this marvelous sweep of grasslands and these immense herds of buffalo and the openness of Indian life, the absence of geographical restraint, the absence of political restraint. They were the freest people the world has ever known.
In a single year, the Cheyenne might camp at various places from the Rio Grande all the way to Canada. I don't know that in world history there had been continental citizens like that before. They saw really the best parts of the West at the best parts of the year. The South is nice in the early spring. And once the temperature hits 110 in Texas, it's nice to be up on the Canadian border, and that was how they structured their lives. You had a continent to live in.
The idea that this was empty space, it was shocking to me that I hadn't noticed that when I was a child. So this is how children read it. They read these books with a complete sense of storytelling and faith in these books.
Little House on the Prairie, Wilder's third novel, would describe her family's time in what she called Indian country.
She also portrays the child, Laura, as having a fear, but also a deep fascination with what she describes as these, wild people who were completely different. That kind of encapsulates the very strange attitude that whites had at that time towards these people, as if they were, first of all, not people, that they were something that could be had for the taking. That is one of the things that makes that novel, I think, one of the most important documents about the history of that time.
When Laura is 2, the Ingalls leave the log cabin bound for Kansas.
Pa stopped the horses and the wagon they were hauling away out on the prairie in Indian territory. "Well, Caroline," he said, "here's the place I've been looking for."
Charles and his family settle near Independence, Kansas, where their third daughter, Carrie, is born.
They settle on land that it's pretty clear he knew was not available for white settlement. At that time, it belonged to the Osage Indians. The logs that Charles Ingalls used to build the Little House on the Prairie did not belong to him. They belonged to the Osage. It was an act of theft. Certainly wasn't seen so at the time by people like Charles Ingalls, but now it's quite clear that it was.
He was the leader of the Hunkpapa band of the Teton Sioux, or Lakota.
Sitting Bull's rise to power comes from spirituality. And I really believe, looking at Sitting Bull, looking into his eyes, I think you can see it.
Sitting Bull led by example. He had a history of bravery. He had the charisma. He embodied for the Lakota the kind of person they needed at a point when they were facing cataclysmic change in their lives when presented with the challenge of white civilization.
in 1868. The Fort Laramie Treaty had created the Great Sioux Reservation, which encompassed most of the modern-day state of South Dakota, as well as millions of acres of hunting grounds to the west and north, including the Black Hills.
The Black Hills was for the Lakota. Not only was it a place to get food, it was a place of extreme holiness. It was a place where they would be born, it was a place where they would live, they would die. It was their backbone. It was a place that was their creation.
By the terms of the treaty, these lands had been granted to the Sioux forever. And in return, they were supposed to cease their hostilities against the Americans and live peacefully, accepting rations from the government at offices known as agencies on the reservation. On July 2nd, 1874, General George Custer and the 7th Cavalry set out west on an expedition to the Black Hills.
Everybody knows that this is an expedition whose purpose is to get the public interested in seizing the Black Hills. Custer is there not just to explore the Black Hills, he's there to publicize the discovery.
It's a tremendous affair. 110 wagons. There are geologists, botanists, 4 newspaper reporters, and probably the most important people of all, 2 miners who are there to search for whatever minerals might happen to be there.
It's 1874 when the news hits the public that there's gold in the Black Hills.
The government had offered to buy the Black Hills for $6 million, but the Lakota had turned them down.
The government's interest in the Black Hills would, in a sense, play into Sitting Bull's hands. He was really looking for a way to pull his people together in the face of this threat coming from the east.
Sitting Bull has decided that he will not negotiate with the United States government, and he continues to recruit Indians who want to come out with him during the summer and hunt. He's trying to gather a kind of Lakota resistance to this incursion.
And soon the little Bighorn Valley is teeming with life. A vast pony herd numbering in the thousands. And not just hundreds of people, but in the great camp circles there are thousands upon thousands of people. Perhaps the greatest gathering of native peoples on the northern plains in its history. For Sitting Bull's people, there's no place to run. There's no place to go. This is it. I mean, this is the last great defense of the Lakota homeland.
Custer had been ordered to force them onto the reservation or destroy them in the process.
The cavalry didn't have their heart or their spirit into their fight, whereas Sitting Bull and the rest of those warriors did. It was their land. It was their last stand. They were fighting for something completely different to a certain extent. They were fighting for their survival. They were fighting for their way of life.
They say the Sitting Bull must have studied Napoleon to defeat Custer. That he was a spy who graduated from West Point and then hadn't gone back to the Sioux and had become, this genius, a military genius for the Sioux.
They couldn't accept the fact that Custer was beaten by American Indians. And some of the press even went so far as to say that Sitting Bull really wasn't an Indian. They didn't want to accept the fact that an Indian or Indians outsmarted them.
There were immediate calls for revenge, and the Army of the West dispatched new columns of troops to track down the Indians. By the fall of that year, virtually all of the Lakota and Cheyenne would be forced back onto the reservations. Only Sitting Bull remained unyielding, living with his band of 5,000 Lakota in Canada.